Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 31st of May, comes to you from London. We start by looking at the dollar index, sinking lower here. Really, just the last couple of days, quite a big sell-off, taking us bearish on the short-term trend. Medium-term trend still very bullish, and the long-term trend, of course, hitting some long-term resistance here. But just a sell-off there, not changing this trend that we've seen over the last several weeks. And if we look at the euro, of course, the converse is true. We're seeing the euro recovering quite strongly yesterday and this morning. But again, the medium-term trend is bearish. Might be just finding some long-term support here. But if you remember the 10 big things report that I did, euro was hitting very big long-term resistance at this level here. So interestingly, we do still have this downside target of 3% hanging over us for the short term. But for the moment, we're bullish. So just looks like we'll go up before we go down. The yen, we're seeing the dollar falling here. This has been going on now for a little over a week. So it shows up in the yen first. The yen is a very good lead indicator for the dollar. And looking at sterling, we're seeing sterling recovering on that dollar weakness as well. But sterling against the euro is sinking lower still, so not looking strong there. Taking a look at sterling against the Swiss franc, bearish here as well. Medium-term chart starting to look quite bearish, and the Australian dollar also turning bearish, medium and short-term. That's the sterling against the dollar. Bitcoin sitting at about $7,500, so just recovering off the low 7,000s we saw recently, but really this medium-term pressure hanging over us and the long-term transition occurring, which we pointed out yesterday. US stock markets actually recovered yesterday somewhat, up over 1% on the S&P. So we're seeing big down days and big up days, a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty in the market. The Nasdaq was up just under 1%, 0.7%, 0.75%. Dow Jones was up 1.25%, but still bearish medium and short term. So even though we're seeing these big moves to the upside like we saw yesterday, we're just not seeing this continuing. And the Russell also just pushing higher there. This is the one index that is looking good, making new highs. The S&P future also just pushing higher as well, and looking a little bit better, and the Nasdaq E-mini also just pushing bullish above the cloud with some upside targets. So it does look like the US market will open slightly higher today as well. Looking at the UK market, recovering this morning, up about 1/3%, but still bearish short term. The UK mid-caps much the same picture. German market actually falling this morning and still looking bearish short term. So Europe not out of the woods by any means. And the French market, the CAC 40, also doing much the same. In Tokyo, we saw stocks up about 2/3%, looking stronger, but still bearish short term, and Hang Seng much the same. We had a terrible day on the Chinese market yesterday, down over 2.5%, up 1.7% this morning, so a lot of volatility creeping in here as well. But medium and short term charts still look worrying, and that long term chart starting to look quite worrying now. New downside target activated, so China is still a big worry. Taking a look at the Indian market. Recovering again overnight, looking a little bit better than the other Asian markets, and the Aussie market also just struggling with that short-term bear trend to fight. Brent crude sitting at $77.35 at the moment, so recovering into a new bullish short-term trend up. So we're seeing the oil price recovering again, and bullish on all three fronts. WTI not quite through on the lagging line on the cloud on the short-term chart yet, so not looking quite as bullish. US Nat gas sitting at $2.90, so just flat at the moment, having been as high as $2.96 this week. But it is looking better than it has been. We're just seeing that gradual trend off the bottom there. Taking a look at the gold price. Gold is sitting at 1305 this morning, so we're back above that 1300 level, activating some new upside targets on the short-term chart. The 1-minute chart for gold, which I keep an eye on, we do have a target of 1324. That's 1.4% upside. And if we look at the silver chart, silver also just turning into bullish territory as well. So A very mixed picture on the medium-term chart, and we see this by this sideways move, not quite as clear as gold for breaking out. Looking at US 10-year yields, we're seeing 2.87% on the 10-year yield. So bond prices having just fallen, the yield has risen a little bit there in the US lately. And of course, bond markets in Europe have had a bit of turmoil this week with the Italian bond market on Italian exit fears. But interestingly, the German bond has risen quite strongly, falling back a bit this morning. German bond yields rising. And taking a look at Apple, we see Apple shares were down slightly overnight. So just having made new highs, just sitting very flat the last 2 weeks. And we can see that on the short-term chart. Just waiting for direction, really. Amazon was up overnight, the 0.75%, looking stronger than Apple now, and really just continuing its uptrend. Google, of course, we've pointed out Google is the laggard of late. It's up 0.7% overnight. Still bearish short and medium term for Google, and with downside targets of 4 and 5%. The Facebook chart looking better medium term, just teetering along at this 187 level, just struggling to break into the 190s, has been for a long time, struggling to do that. And last of all, Microsoft still trending up, was up just under 1%, 98.95. We're a smidgen now from breaking the $100 mark for Microsoft, and I think that will be a key milestone. We've still got some pretty big upside targets there. It's one of the better looking tech stocks. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.